take down content. So if you're linking to an outside site, and particularly a large number, you need to check regularly that none of those external sites have changed the URL of a page you're linking to. And also, even if you're linking within your site, so you have a lot of internal links are great because they support SEO, but it can be a problem if they're broken. And I'm going to give an example of that later on. But so that's another issue, is to check for broken links. You also want to look at your Google Analytics data and look at who's referring traffic to your site, because sometimes you can have a spammy bot attach itself to your site, or some spammy site that's attached to your site, and you can find that out by looking at your Google Analytics account and who's referring traffic to your site. If you've got a bunch of spammy like bots that are sending traffic to your site, Google will ding you for that. In fact, one client had probably about 50 of them that somehow had attached to her site. I don't know if at some point she had bought what they call backlinks that you can buy to drive traffic to your site, but it's never a good idea to buy these backlinks. But anyway, she had them. So in addition to her site not ranking well in search because Google associated her with all these kind of spammy organizations, even her email was going into like junk mail and stuff because, you know, her domain name was then kind of associated with spammy organizations. So it's just something to be aware of. I think a lot of sites have security things in place so that these bots can attach, but it's definitely worth checking. A couple other quick things is, I just mentioned backlinks. One thing that supports SEO tremendously is if you can get other external, credible, reputable organizations that are willing to put a link on their site to your site. So that's called a backlink, where other people are linking to your site and driving traffic to your site. And that is extremely beneficial for us because then Google you know, views you as a trusted site, and it's more likely to serve up your site because you seem trustworthy. We talked earlier about linking internally to other pages of your site. That will help with your SEO. And then I also think a lot of organizations I've noticed don't really have a statement on their site where they really let Google know. You have to think of Google as a little spider that's going out and crawling your site and indexing your site. So you have to tell Google what you're all about, who you serve. If you don't tell Google, Google's not going to know. So it's really important to have what I call a geographic description or statement on your site that tells Google who you serve, where you're located. Really send out some kind of geographic triggers or messages to Google. So then when you want to rank for a particular geography, Google knows to serve you up because you notified Google through your website content and even your behind the scenes tags what geographies you serve. But I see a lot of people make that mistake. They just don't really call out either where they're located or what the geographies are of the clients they serve. And then, you know, the other thing is, in most cases, it may make sense to have a Google My Business profile. And I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, but Google Maps and Google My Business profiles kind of go hand in hand. If you have one, you usually have the other. And even if you're not trying to rank locally, so let's say you're not trying to rank for Braintree, Massachusetts or something, you still want to have a Google My Business profile because having one supports your SEO in general. So it supports your kind of global ranking, even if you're not trying to rank locally. And this last tip is related to both Google My Business and your website. So with both your Google My Business profile on your website, you want to keep them current. You want to be posting to them regularly. You want to be refreshing content. Google rewards sites in general from an SEO standpoint if they keep their data fresh and current. So if your website looks like it's been sitting out there for a year and you're not making any updates to it, or you're not making any updates to your Google My Business profile, Google's less likely to serve your website up. So those are some of my low-hanging SEO fruit.
That's really helpful, Gail. Thank you. Does anyone have any specific questions that might be related to your own website that you might be wondering, how do we optimize?
I do. So Gail, aside from, posting a regular blog or something on your
Right.
website, what are some of the simple ways that people keep their website fresh without driving themselves crazy with like redesign all the time?
Yeah, well, blog posts are definitely a key one. So it's great that you guys do that because, blog posts are definitely a way to store some high volume keywords and, terms you want Google to rank you for. But I also suggest things like FAQs. Sometimes an FAQ is a great place to store information, and then also that supports SEO as well. I would say the blog and something like an FAQ are the ones where it's easiest to store the content. And even like looking at your About Us page once in a while and seeing if there's something you can update there, because a lot of people will write their About Us page when they launch their website, then they never go back and revisit it. And so it's very dated. I've read a lot of dated About Us sections of people's sites. And I think, if there's anything new or cool that you're up to, that's a perfect place to put that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Janet. Oh, I think you're on mute. Janet, can you unmute?
I apologize, everyone. I have a question about those broken links that you mentioned. I run into them all the time.
Yeah.
Are there any tools for checking for broken links?
There are, and I honestly, I'd have to investigate for you whether you have to pay for them or not. I haven't discovered a free one, but there may be a free one out there. But there are tools that will crawl your site and identify those for you. So if you've got a really large site, it might be worth using one of those tools to save you the hassle of trying to identify.
Is there one that isn't free that you would recommend?
I will have to investigate that for you, honestly, because
Okay.
I haven't used one. I just know that they exist. I've gotten like ads about them and read about them. I just haven't employed any of them myself or for a client, but I know they're out there.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody just posted, I think.
Oh, Site Improve. So Rachel had suggested Site Improve, one word, and it is a paid.
Yeah, they hook into Google Analytics, and they're awesome. I actually don't know. I don't handle the subscription fee. Our IT department does, but I think they have different levels depending on how big your site is.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. Great. We have another question that was submitted earlier, and this question is, so what are some longer term, maybe more intensive organic tactics to support ranking well in Google?
So this is where we're going to get into the clam chowder question, and I don't know if anybody answered it, but I had put that up there, and you can answer it right now if you want. But how many times on average a month does someone enter the phrase best clam chowder into Google?
Is this globally?
Yeah, globally. So anybody across the world that uses Google. How many times a month on average does somebody type that term into Google?
More in the summer in New England.
So yeah, so it was best clam chowder Boston. So
I'm putting my numbers here.
Yeah, so I'll just provide the answer. And so the answer is actually 1,600 a month. So 1,600 a month, type best clam chowder into Google. And then if you take it a degree further, 210 a month, type best clam chowder Boston. And then if you want to really get into the specific type of clam chowder in Boston, 90 people a month type best New England clam chowder Boston. So I just wanted to share that because it's relevant to one of these longer term tactics that you could take related to SEO. And really it's all about doing keyword research. I don't know how much people are familiar with it, but keyword research really allows you, well, it informs so much more than SEO, but it lets you figure out what are the high volume search terms that your target audiences are putting into Google relevant to your product, services, and the solutions to problems that you provide. And that's really important to think about that third piece. What solutions to problems do you provide? Because quite often people will be putting in a question, how to lose weight or something like that, versus, you know, your specific product or service. But keyword research helps you get at, you know, get at the phrases that your target audiences are using. And so with this clam chowder question, we could see that the search volume really varied, you know, and the number got smaller and smaller the more specific we got about the clam chowder phrase. But that's the information that keyword research will help you uncover. And I always say keyword research, yeah, like I said, it informs your search engine optimization, because you can then take those high volume search terms, figure out which ones really are appropriate for your business, and then you can incorporate them in your website content, your behind the scenes page title tags, your page description tags. You'll hear the term meta tags. That's what all that is. Tags for your photos and images, and even incorporate those high volume search terms in, you know, the way that you save a photo or an image. You can save it so that that file name has high volume terms. But in addition to just informing your SEO and your website, it can really inform your marketing strategy, because if you do your keyword research and you see that people aren't really searching on your product, or they're only searching on certain of your products, you may want to change your strategy. You might want to promote, you know, the services or products that people are searching on the most. You might want to promote them more. And you may decide, okay, no one's really searching on this particular product or service. I need to change my strategy. Now it's got to be more of a push versus a pull strategy, which means I've got to put the idea in people's heads. They're not going to be searching, and I can't depend on search to get people to my website or to buy my product. So I'm going to have to figure out ways to get in front of them. So yeah, as part of the more intensive long-term SEO tactics, it's really about keyword research, and then making sure that your content and your tags incorporate these high volume, these high volume keywords. And then the other thing you need to think about in general is your website responsive to the various devices that may access it. So I didn't bring that up as a low-hanging fruit, because if your website is not mobile friendly, if it's not responsive to different devices that access it, that's really can be a big lift for somebody. You may need to start from scratch. It may not be possible to take your website and make it mobile friendly or responsive. So to me, it's more of an intense topic or project than just something that's kind of low-hanging fruit. It could mean a big lift for you, but it is very critical, obviously, that your website is responsive to mobile, particularly right now, because Google favors mobile and local search right now. So if your website is not mobile friendly, that's really going to hurt you from an SEO standpoint.
That's really useful information, Gail. Thank you. Well, this question is partially from me because I tend to be more of a visual person, and I'm hoping you can address this. Given that it's often hard to find time to look at digital analytics and metrics, what are the top 5 metrics I should be reviewing regularly in Google Analytics?
Okay, let me just share my screen for a second. Okay, I assume everybody can see my screen. Great.
Yes.
Okay, so well, what I'm going to walk you through is some of the Google Analytics metrics and reports that are kind of my go-to when I'm looking at a client's information. I'm always very excited when a client gives me access to their Google Analytics account, so I can really see what's going on, not only from a website standpoint, but from a marketing standpoint too, because your Google Analytics data can inform so much more than your website. Sure, you're going to learn what visitors are doing on your site and what they're hoping to accomplish, but it also really informs your marketing strategy, because you can really figure out, well, which marketing tactics are really driving data to my site. And I like to look at a period of at least 3 months at a time. So, you know, when you go into Google Analytics, you can set the date range that you want to look at, and I always set it for at least a 3-month period. And then I try to compare it to the previous 3-month period. But as far as looking at your data in general goes, I think it's ideal to at least look at it quarterly. And if you can look at it monthly, great. But at a minimum, you should be looking at your Google Analytics data quarterly, so you can really see if there's any positive or negative trends going on. And that's also part of the reason why I like to look at 3 months at a time, because, you know, if you're looking at 3 months data at a time, you can really see if there's a certain trend going on, a positive or negative one, versus if you just looked at 1 month's worth of data. So the data that we're going to be looking at right now is it's data from a client that's an international trade lawyer. So I just wanted to give some background. And we're looking at, you know, 3 months worth of data. It's June 1st to August 31st, 2020. And also, I just wanted to call out on these slides, whatever's highlighted on these slides in this left-hand nav bar, it just shows the section of Google Analytics that, you know, I'm accessing to look at the data. And I think most of you are probably familiar with Google Analytics to some degree, but basically this left-hand nav has the various reports and metrics that are available to you. If you scroll down and you know it, like there's audience reports, there's acquisition reports, and the acquisition is how people get to your site. Then there's behavior sites, so behavior reports that let you look at, you know, what activity are people doing on your site. So, you know, I think it's fairly intuitive, but I did just want to call that out. So in this case, we're looking at the acquisition reports. We're in all traffic and we're in channels. And this is my go-to slide. If I could only look at one thing in Google Analytics, this is what I would look at. And it's always the first place I go when a client gives me access to their site, because I really want to understand, how is traffic getting to their website? What's driving the traffic to their site? So in this case, you know, in this case, you'll see like direct traffic, and that's people that, you know, either know their URL or domain name and put it directly into their browser or have bookmarked it. That's what, in this, you know, client's case, 60% or close to 60% of their traffic is coming directly. And then organic search, which is search engine traffic, so it could be Yahoo, Bing, but mainly Google, since Google's, you know, 90% or more of search traffic. So organic search in this case, you know, 25% of their visitors search on relevant terms in a search engine, and the search engine served up their site to them, and they clicked on the link in a results listing to land on their site. And then social is their social media. And in this case, you'll see 8% of the traffic was coming through social media, which I think is actually very high. I tend to see 5% or less for social media as far as driving traffic to someone's website. So this is pretty good. They also have a decent amount of referral traffic. I think it's because they're a credible resource on international trade law. So, you know, they have other organizations that are posting links on their site to this client site. And what was I going to say about there's something I wanted to say? Yeah, so these are what we call backlinks. Referrals are backlinks. They're links on external sites that are driving traffic to your site. So again, they've got a decent amount of that traffic. And then other is just, if Google doesn't know how to classify some other source of traffic, it doesn't fit into one of their buckets, it will just clump it in under other. And in their case, I looked at the other, and it was links and RSS feeds that was driving traffic to their site. So all in all, they've got a good mix of traffic. You know, sometimes I like to see the organic search be a bit higher than this is. But it really depends on your particular situation, what percentage you want to be direct versus organic, because I always equate direct traffic with repeat or return visitors. And it often goes hand in hand, not always, but it often does. And so if you have a need for your target audiences to be returning to your site over and over again, you want that direct number to be high. But maybe that's not your situation, and it's more important for you to be getting new people visiting your site. And if it's particularly important to get new people, then you really want to have a strong percentage of your traffic coming from organic search. So
I have
go
a
ahead.
question. I'm sorry, Gail, and don't mean
Yeah.
to interrupt.
Yeah.
I do have a question. I'm curious as to how many people in the group do check their traffic sources, even on a quarterly basis. I'm just, if you could just raise your hand if you are looking at these numbers on a regular basis. Okay. That's helpful. So it looks like not too many. And so is this helpful? Do folks feel just by gathering this information here that you might be more willing to look at it on a regular basis and make decisions, drive decisions from there? Yeah. Great. Okay, good.
Vicki,
Yeah.
I just want to say, this is so informative. I'm not sure how much I know about our analytics period. I mean, it's amazing. So much of this is new to me. Now, maybe it's not new to somebody on my staff, but it's new to me.
Well, I think it's new to a lot of folks, so don't feel bad. And that's why we welcome any question. Please don't feel that any question is something that you should already know. We're learning all the time. And these, things are changing so rapidly too, that there may be things that people were looking at in the past, or that they're not aware of, that there are more statistics or more information that's available that you could be looking at.
I also think that the need for them and the importance of them has changed so dramatically now in the past 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think of our website as kind of a necessary thing we had to have, just kind of as a backup to the relationships we had in the world. Mm-hmm. But now I think of our website as, oh my gosh, in some ways, the main portal to who we are and what we do in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
They're being seen as more of a two-way conversation as opposed to just a one-way.
Wow.
Here's information about us. So it should be a tool that you're welcoming conversation as well, and knowing who's coming. So it's important to know who's coming to the table, who's interested. The other thing that we've seen is that whereas in the past, it was so important to have a compelling homepage because that's where most folks entered. And that's not the case anymore. People are not going to websites by way of a homepage. They're directly being funneled to other pages within the site. So that's just another good way to look at where people are coming from and know that on that page is where you want to have your most important information, and how you want to direct them should be happening from that page. What action do you want them to take? So it just helps to make further decisions about your website.
I see more and more websites becoming more simple and more simple and more simple. Is that a trend that you're seeing?
Well, it is, because people's attention span is getting smaller and smaller. It is reducing by it used to be by the year. Now it's by the quarter. People's attention on a website is so minimal. It's a matter of seconds. So that's the reason why there's little information. We have to be able to present information so that people can easily scan and get to where they want to go, like right away. They're no longer repositories for a whole backlog of information and articles and so forth. So it is a trend, but it's based on viewing, based on how long we can capture attention online these days.
So this slide here is just like a graphic way of viewing the previous information we just looked at, and you can access it the same way under the acquisition reports. Go to overview, and I just wanted to call up that if it's easier for you to look at or share the information with someone else about your top traffic sources, you can look at it these two ways here on this slide.
Mm-hmm.
And so this, Vicki gave a great intro into this thing, because this is what she was just talking about. This is where do people start on your site. And so to look at this data, you go to the behavior reports, you go to behavior flow. And I love this section of the site of Google Analytics. And I tend to look at this even before I look at the site content, which is the pages of the site that you view, because to me, it's really important to understand what is the page that people are starting on your site. Like, where do they land? Where do they enter your site? And what do they do after they enter your site and they come on that one page? Where do they go after that? And, you know, it could take forever to walk through all these little lines and squiggles. We're not going to do that today. But what I wanted to show, you know, is this example from, again, this is an international trade lawyer. In her case, the majority of her website visitors, not all, but a large percentage of them, you'll see she, you know, in the time frame of the report, she had, you know, 1,300 visitor sessions. 709 of those entered on the home page. When you see this little slash like that, that's the people entering on the home page. And then in her case, if you look at the other starting pages, these other pages where people were starting, this next one, True Cost, that's a blog post or similar to a blog post. Unfortunately, this HTML area, the 404, shows that she's got some broken links on her site. So that's something she needs to address. So people, that's not a good situation. And then also these next few pages here, these are also like blog posts. And it just reinforces that quite often, like Vicki said, people aren't starting on your site on the home page. And we've seen plenty of instances where the home page isn't even one of the top landing pages or starting pages. Quite often a blog post might be one of the you know, highest ranking pages. Sometimes it's not even one of the other main pages of your site where people are landing. And so you really need to identify what are the top pages people are starting on, and making sure that those starting pages have calls to action, and like call out to people different activities that they might want to complete on the site or that you want them to complete on the site. And those are called conversions, desired visitor behaviors or activities. You need to call those out pretty immediately, because you might only have one chance to get somebody to complete those actions by letting them know on the page that they land on your site on that they can conduct these activities, or, you know, you can encourage them to conduct them. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but if you look at, you know, you can kind of follow like where did the traffic go? Well, you'll see in this particular case, and this is very, very common, a lot of people will exit the site right from whatever the starting page is they land on. So in this case, you know, there were 1,300 sessions, but only 154 of those sessions then moved on to another page of the site. So, and in this case, they moved on to like the blog page, the contact us page, a bio page about the founder, a meet the team page. And so you lose people rather quickly, you know, and so you really need to look at this, see where people are landing, and then see where they're going after, to try to determine kind of what call outs or call to action you want to have on your various landing pages. And particularly if you have Google Ads and you're running Google Ads, well, you know ahead of time where you're landing those people on your ads, what the final destination is. So you want to make sure those you know, those pages where you're landing people with your Google Ads have important conversion actions called out. Does anybody have any questions on this one before we move on?
So Gail, there are a few questions. And
okay, let me see.
Run through.
Yeah, because I can't see the chat, but if you want to read them.
Yes. So Janet's question is, in the past, I've relied on Google Sales for keyword research. Is this a good idea?
Google Sales? Do you mean Google Ads? Do you mean, I'm not sure what Google Sales is, but Google, you can use the Google the Google Ads Keyword Planner tool, and that's the tool that I use, because the reason I like the Google Ads Keyword tool the best is, first of all, it's free. And secondly, what's really great about it is that you can do your keyword research by very specific geography. You can get down to the level of a city or town, or you can do it by country. You can do it by they have access to data for a variety of countries, not just the US. You can do a certain mile radius. So let's say you want to do keyword research for 50-mile radius of Boston, you can do that. So that's the tool that I use.
Great, thank you, Gail. Another question from Eileen is, how do you conduct high value term searches?
Well, yeah, so that's what keyword research really is. Keyword research helps you identify, relevant to the product, service, and solutions you offer, what terms are most often entered on a monthly basis in a browser to identify an organization that offers the services, solutions, and products you do. So, you know, what happens is when you use a keyword research planner tool, you're gonna provide like a tool like the Google Ads tool with some preliminary keywords or search terms that you think your target audiences are using for the products and services you offer. Google then takes that information and then it spits out a whole bunch more terms, like a gigantic number in a lot of cases of other relevant terms, and it provides the average monthly search volume. And so I do this work with clients all the time, but basically once we get that data, we sort the data and we look at the search terms that have the highest average monthly search volume, and we go through them and we say, well, which ones are really authentic to that client and to that client's services and products, and should we be using this in our website content or behind the scenes page title tags? I'll give you a really quick example. I had one client that liked to use the word family care when they offer daycare services. And, you know, family care is great, and that's an internal term they use and kind of a nice little phrase they came up with. But when we did the keyword research, nobody was using the term family care. They were using the term daycare. And so we quickly went back to their website and changed it so that we were using the term daycare in their content and the behind the scenes page title tags. Little fixes like that can have a huge, huge difference. Mm-hmm. So I hope that's what you were getting at by your question.
Great.
All right, so let's move on to the next metrics or reports that I tend to look at in Google Analytics. And this one is one I just referenced when I looked at the starting pages of the site or the behavior flow, and that's the most viewed pages. And usually there's huge overlap between the pages that people are starting on the site most on and the most viewed pages, because if people are starting on your site on certain pages, well, those will often end up being the most viewed. So for the particular client question, particularly with the home page was one of the key starting pages, and that was obviously one of the most viewed pages. And then several of the blog posts that people were landing or starting on the site on were also top viewed pages. And then I just wanted to quickly call out this bounce rate up at the top, because people always ask what the bounce rate is. And so for this client, the bounce rate is 82.22%. And the bounce rate is the percentage of people that are exiting from your site or exiting from a page, if you're looking at the bounce rate for a page versus the bounce rate for a whole site. But it's how many people are exiting your site without interacting with a page in any way. So they're not like clicking on a button, or they're not clicking on a link within your content to another page of the site, or taking any kind of that action on your site. And so, believe it or not, many sites have a bounce rate as much as 70 or 80%, but you know, the lower you can get your bounce rate, the better, I think, in general. In certain cases, you don't need people to stay on your site and you want them to take one action and then leave. But in general, you know, you want to get your bounce rate down. So that bounce rate's fairly high, but it's not that different from what I tend to see in general for clients. And then these two I put together, time on site and number of pages viewed, because they kind of go hand in hand, and they both included in the same, report area in Google Analytics. So again, we're in the audience report overview. Number of pages. So in this client's case, people were looking at about 1.6 pages or 2 pages during any session. And then their session was lasting about 1 minute and 30 seconds. And this may seem low to you, but actually keeping somebody on your site for 1 minute and 30 seconds is actually fairly decent. And also, even though 1.68 is decent, because a lot of times it's even less than that. To look, to kind of gauge whether or not these metrics are good or bad, there's 2 things you can do. One, you can compare to the previous 3 months data so that you're comparing to historical data and are there's numbers going up or down. And the other thing is there's another report within the audience report called the benchmarking report, and you can go into the channels report in there, and you can actually benchmark your number of pages per session and your session duration against other organizations in your industry. It's really cool because you can see, okay, how do I compare to everybody else that's in this similar pool? And Google has a very, very large database of organizations that use Google Analytics. So when you're looking at the databases for your particular industry, it's a significant amount of data. So, you should be able to consider it to be pretty accurate and a good way to, kind of gauge how you're doing compared to other organizations. And then this one, you can access this report from the same page we were just looking at. But I also like to look at this and kind of see how much of the traffic is returning traffic versus new visitor traffic. And in most cases, not in this particular instance, by the way, but in many cases, the returning visitor traffic will sort of mirror the direct traffic, and the figures will be similar. But in this client's case, I think about 50-something% of their traffic was direct traffic, and yet the returning visitor traffic was only 6%. So what I'm guessing about their particular situation is that they're probably doing a really good job of sharing their domain name or their URL on all their marketing activities. So maybe if they're doing some print marketing or print advertising or some other traditional marketing or whatever it may be, they're doing a good job of getting their domain name out there, and people are snagging it from these other marketing vehicles. And that's why, their direct traffic, it doesn't really add up to this returning visitor traffic. But regardless, this is another good thing to look at. So those are kind of my top go-to spots. And I know everybody's got their favorite, but to me, those are the most critical things to be looking at when you look at your Google Analytics data.
And Gail, I have a quick question about this particular slide, and that is, it's wonderful to get new visitors to your site. You always want to do that. Returning visitors could mean that you're building relationships. And
right.
A lot of businesses that's what they're seeking to do, is to have content on their site where people find value in it and continue to come back. So what on average do you feel a good split would be or should be?
Honestly, maybe a 50-50, because, it definitely depends how much you need and want visitors returning to your site. So I think with like a nonprofit or organization, you really want people coming back. You want to have advocates. You want to have a community. You want people that get to know you and support you and hopefully donate to you. And so you want that return traffic. So you might even want that number to be above 50%. But I think it's, for most organizations, it's probably ideal to have a good mix of return customers. If you're able to cross-sell new products and services to a customer, or just you want them to come on and read various information. And then, the new visitors, well, I think you always want some new traffic. You've always got to be kind of replacing your what do you call it, like building your sales funnel and having new prospective clients to speak with or new donors to speak with. So yeah, this I think this would be better for this client if there was a better mix and more balance between the two.
Wonderful. Well, we have a few minutes left, and I do have a question, and this is a question that we hear quite often, and maybe it will be helpful to the group as well. What are some of the biggest social media mistakes that people tend to make? What do you see? And particularly during this time of the pandemic. And this gets into best practices as well. So I could approach it on that side, or, you know, the biggest mistakes. So maybe you can share some insights there with us.
So one thing I've seen going on a lot during the pandemic is people going off the grid, the social media grid. And I just think that's a huge mistake, because I've seen a lot of it. And I just think it sends the wrong message out to your constituencies and your customers, because if you're going off the grid, then it either seems like you don't care about them, you're not stable, something's going bad on your end and you're falling apart. So it can almost make people worry, why did she disappear? Or like I said, make them feel like you don't care about them, or, you know, you're not there for them when they need you. And so I just don't think that's a good move during the pandemic, to just kind of disappear. Other things I see is I see people leaving what they call pinned posts on certain social media networks. So like Twitter, you can pin a post and put it up at the top of your post, but a lot of people put it up and they forget it's there. And so then that pin is still up there 6 months later or a year later, and it's outdated information. So that's just a simple thing. But I think just in general, making your post too self-serving, and your profile and your ongoing post too self-serving is a particularly bad move anytime, but definitely during the pandemic, when you want to show that you're part of the solution and part of the community, and there to help people. So you really need to mix up your posts. So, you know, some can be about you and drive traffic to your site via link to your site, but you definitely want to reshare other people's posts, you want to retweet people's posts, you want to comment on people's posts, and even share other people's content via a link to their site. So it's not all about you. I guess, yeah, just make sure that you don't post things that make it seem like you're oblivious to the fact that there's a pandemic going on. Because I think, you know, either promoting something that's very expensive or would seem like a luxury right now, or encouraging people to do something that totally goes against pandemic guidelines, that to me is a big social media no-no. And then you never really want to do like a sales pitch in your social media post. So I've seen people put phone numbers, or call me at this number, or email address. That's just, you don't want to do a heavy duty sales pitch like that with your post. That turns people off, and you lose followers that way. And then just be careful about using internal speak too much with external audiences. So you don't want to be using like acronyms or like scientific terms, or just terms that maybe you've coined within your organization that your external audiences wouldn't be able to relate to.
Great. That's really helpful. We have time for maybe one more quick question. Would anyone like to dive in? No, we answered questions. Well, things might come up, and we totally anticipate that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to, chat with you one-on-one, address any questions you have. I recognize there's a lot of information that was shared here, and I hope you have came away with some good information that are useful to you and your organization at this time. So I do want to thank you, and if you found this session valuable, please send along your feedback. In any case, we always welcome any feedback that you might have. We tend to use that going forward. And if you signed up for next week's session, we look forward to seeing you there. And again, that will be event planning and marketing with Liz and Amanda. And again, if you have signed up but can't make it to that session, please let us know in advance. We would love to have someone else fill that seat, or you can pass it along to a colleague. So thank you again. We look forward to continuing the conversation, and I hope to see you soon. Be well, lead well, and stay happily caffeinated. Great afternoon, all.
Thank you, Gail.
Bye,
Great
everybody.
job.
Thank you.
Great job. Very informative.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Liz.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.